Next Chapter Podcasts.
The world is growing more complicated by the day, but too often, everyone seems to be operating on the same old assumptions about global affairs. But if you're not sure that world domination by the United States is the right path for America or the world, or if you've got questions about conventional geopolitical thinking, you should check out American Prestige, a foreign policy podcast from a different perspective. Every week on American Prestige, historian and former Bernie Sanders foreign policy advisor Daniel Bessner, that's me, and my co-host, the journalist Derek Davison, analyze U.S. foreign policy from a critical framework that sheds light on myriad topics related to international affairs. So, if you're curious to know what U.S. foreign policy would look like if the interests of all people in the world, and not only rich Americans, were taken into account, then check out American Prestige at AmericanPrestigePod.com. That's AmericanPrestigePod.com. And you could, of course, also find us on your favorite podcast app.
From the history of radioactive makeup to all the loony things Henry VIII did to ensure we never stop making movies about him, Weird History is a podcast that answers all the questions you didn't even know you had about the most unbelievable people, places, and events of the past. Based on the hugely successful YouTube channel, Weird History invites you to bone up on what it was like to use a public bathroom in ancient Rome while learning about the single worst year of all time. Don't worry, we missed it by a millennium or so. Then get the skinny on modern history, like the true story behind The Conjuring, and just what the hell Steven Seagal did to get banned from SNL. Let Weird History be your guide to the stranger side of history they don't teach you in school. Because the past is weird, a lot weirder than you think. Subscribe now, wherever you get your podcasts.
Nigerians gravitated to where they could go to school because the first round of folks that came here generally came from money, had parents that had money. The second round and third round, like people like my parents, like my dad, for example, my dad didn't come from money, but he had family that did. So whenever he looked to come to America, he went to where he had a family member. It's kind of like that chain migration that they talk about.
America is a light. It's a light of hope. And the immigrants that come in here are transforming this nation by bringing so much of their great minds, right? And so if we make immigration a bad thing, if we show the world that we're so divided, that we don't want people coming in that look like us, that all look the same, we're going to send a signal that we don't want you. And I think we often forget that that's going to hurt us economically long term.
You know what I'm saying? It's like we got a demo tape and nobody want to hear it, but it's like this, the South got something to say.
Hello, and welcome to Our New South, a podcast series presented by Levine Museum of the New South in Charlotte, North Carolina. Levine Museum connects the past to the future to realize the promises of a New South. To learn more and donate to projects like this, visit museumoftheNewSouth.org. Hi, my name is Kevin Blackistone of the Washington Post, coming to you from the University of Maryland, where I teach, and I'm joined by my co-host, Dr. Robert Green II, a professor of history at Claflin University. Our New South Season 2 explores the complexities of the many New Souths that make up today's New South. The series highlights opportunities and challenges that different communities face, diving into censorship and healthcare, tourism and religion, struggles for rights and resources, and the global reverberations of New South culture.
We thank you for joining us on this journey and for making the show a Signal Award and Anthem Award winner. Follow the show, rate and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Okay, let's get to today's episode of the show.
The South got something to say.
Today's episode of Our New South focuses on immigrant communities in the New South. Last season, we dedicated an episode to immigration in the South, which happened to be one of our most popular episodes. When preparing for this season, we felt we barely scratched the surface on the topic, so we wanted to return to it and broaden our focus. But before we get to our guests, I would like to ask Dr. Robert Green to provide us with some brief insight on immigrant communities in the South.
As we established in Season 1 of Our New South, immigration to the U.S. South has dramatically changed the racial, ethnic, political, and cultural fabric of the region. While more Americans are becoming aware of the growing Latino population throughout the former Confederacy, other groups have also begun to call the U.S. South home. Among them are immigrant groups from the continents of Asia and Africa. All of them have their own unique stories calling America, and in particular the U.S. South, home. It was the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965 that removed quotas on the numbers of immigrants from places such as Latin America, Sub-Saharan Africa, and South and East Asia. Eventually, those and other immigrant groups grew in size and importance throughout the United States. For example, refugees from Vietnam would settle in, among other places, Louisiana, lured by both the familiarity of the climate and the Catholic faith in that part of America. Immigrants from India would also make their homes in major cities throughout the South, including Atlanta, Dallas, Raleigh, and Houston. The sons and daughters of these immigrants, such as Bobby Jindal of Louisiana and Nikki Haley of South Carolina, have become key players in the perennially cutthroat game of Southern politics. Sub-Saharan Africa, meanwhile, is seeing more immigrants coming to the U.S. every year. Now, the U.S. South is seeing, for the first time since the 19th century, a major influx of people from West Africa. However, this migration to North America is, thankfully, entirely voluntary this time. Nigerian immigrants have settled in places such as Houston and Dallas. The population of Cameroonian immigrants has changed the fabric of places such as Prince George's County in Maryland. Indeed, immigration has begun to change the face of who is in power in the New South. Immigration's changes to what and who is part of the New South is a key part of the last 50 years of Southern history. Groups such as Sub-Saharan Africans and Indians are, in various ways, ascending the ladder of political and social power in the region. Also, some of the newest restaurants in the South specialize in cuisines from Nigeria, Ghana, India, Ethiopia, and Korea. While some Southerners have long debated the use of sugar versus salt and grits, immigrants from West Africa have introduced Southerners to passionate debates about jollof rice. Above all, however, these immigrants have embraced the 21st century version of the American dream. Not just the acquisition of a home and starting a family, but like so many other Americans, dreaming of ways to give back to their fellow citizens via public service. In that sense, the new immigrant story to the New South rhymes with that of previous generations of immigrants to the United States.
Our first guest is Steve Jr. Ezeonu. Jr. was born in Nigeria. His parents moved him here at age 2, and in 2021, at age 22, he was elected to the Grand Prairie, Texas City Council. Jr. defeated an incumbent who had served for 12 years. Jr. is the first Black council member to represent the city since the early 1990s, and he is the youngest in the city's history. It's our pleasure to welcome Jr. Ezeonu. Well, Councilman, thank you very much for joining our podcast here, Our New South. And you are coming to us from Grand Prairie, Texas, which is the first place I lived when I moved to Dallas to work for the Dallas Morning News way back in 1986. So I know your terrain pretty well. But as always, when we start out, we like to have our guests introduce themselves to our audience, your name, where you're at, and what it is you do.
Well, Kevin, Robert, thank you so much for having me. My name is Junior Ezeonu, and I live in Grand Prairie, Texas. I serve on the Grand Prairie City Council as an at-large member, meaning that I represent the entire city. So all 209,000 people that live in Grand Prairie are my constituents. And I've been serving since June of 2021. I was reelected this past year in 2024 in May, and also was appointed as our deputy mayor pro tem for the city council. Basically just means that if the mayor misses a council meeting, the mayor pro tem takes over. I'm directly beneath the mayor pro tem. I'm the deputy mayor pro tem. So just an honor to be here. Really looking forward to this conversation. And just thank you again for having me.
Absolutely. And you were born in Nigeria and immigrated with your parents to Grand Prairie. So how old were you and how did that happen? What was your parents' attraction to North Texas?
Definitely. So my father moved here in 89. He moved to America in 89, lived in Irving, different parts of the Metroplex for some time before buying a house in Arlington. He went back to Nigeria in 1998 to look for a wife, literally trying to get married. So he went back to Nigeria in 98, found my mother, they got married. in late 98. I was born March 14th, 99. And he brought us all here on March 9th, 2002. That was the exact date that we all came here to the States. It was me, my younger brother, Franklin, who's a real estate agent in the DFW. And I have two younger siblings that were later born in America later on. But my dad had family here. He had a cousin that lived in the DFW, had different family members that lived in the DFW. So that's what attracted him to come to the DFW, Dallas-Fort Worth area. And that's how we ended up being here.
And was there something about the economy or the climate or anything in particular that you think drew your father here?
I think number one is just economic opportunity. The DFW, Dallas-Fort Worth, well, hell, America as a whole is a land of opportunity. So anywhere, if you're coming from a country that's suffering with an economic recession or just economic strife and issues, you're looking for anywhere to go. But the Dallas-Fort Worth area was booming. It was growing. You could buy a home for an affordable rate back in the 90s, not so much in the 2020s now, unfortunately. And you can, build a family and build a home somewhere that is prosperous, but also at the same time, you can, how do I say this? It was accommodating the life of a young person that's trying to build something here in the States. So that's why he moved here, and we've been blessed to live here. I actually moved from Arlington to Grand Prairie back in 2016. So I've been in GP for a little bit over about 9 years now.
And of course, I refer to it as North Texas.
Yes, sir.
But before you can refer to it as North Texas, you have to recognize that it's in Texas and it's in the South. And so one of the things we like to understand on this show is what is your understanding of what the South is? And particularly for someone of your ethnic background and what the South is.
That's a really good question. And my perspective, because I'm a big history and geography nerd, is the South is basically where the Mason-Dixon line was drawn. So every state underneath Mason-Dixon, so like Maryland all the way down is considered the South. But Texas, some people won't call Texas the South. I think Texas is the South. I think we have a lot of Southern hospitality. I look at us as being part of the Bible Belt. We share a lot of those traditions that other states like Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, South Carolina, North Carolina will share and exhibit. So I think those two things are part of it. Definitely our culture is very similar to the rest of the states in the South. Unfortunately, we're part of the Confederacy, which plays a part in making us the South. And a lot of the laws that were passed in the 60s directly impacted Texas. For example, I recently bought a home last year, and I live in Grand Prairie, but I'm zoned to Mansfield ISD. Grand Prairie is a weird city in that we have so many different school districts that overlap with the city. Mansfield ISD was one of the last, if not the final school district in Texas to desegregate. They desegregated in the early 1970s. And we just got two African-American women elected to the school board in the last couple of years, Dr. Benita Reed and Dr. Jandel Crutchfield. But those different things also played a part into making Texas a true representative of the South. Our history when it comes to racial segregation, when it comes to slavery, when it comes to the Jim Crow laws that made it difficult for African Americans and different people of color to get ahead in the country. Those play a part, but also I think our dynamism, our economy, the opportunities, the heat, those are different characteristics of Texas as well. And our reasons that people are moving here by the boatload every day. I know to the North Texas area, the DFW, thousands of people move here daily, looking for opportunity, looking for job opportunities, looking to buy a home where it's more affordable than on the East and West Coast.
Well, Junior, thank you so much for that wonderful answer. And I'm Dr. Robert Green II. And I have to say before we go any further, Kevin mentioned moving to Grand Prairie in 1986. That was the year in which I was born. So that should give you some sense of our dynamic here in the show. But again, Junior, welcome to the program. Really excited to have you on. And I was especially excited to get you on the program because I am deeply intrigued by this idea of immigration from sub-Saharan Africa to the American South, right? In particular, talking about Nigerian immigration to the United States, to the American South. You kind of got into this a moment ago, but could you talk a bit more about sort of the similarities and differences in cultures between Nigerian Americans and the American South?
Nigerian Americans and other sub-Saharan Africans and different people of color would have had a lot of difficulty and trouble moving and immigrating to this great country had it not been for the efforts and the work that folks during the civil rights era, the leaders that suffered and were killed and were brutalized. The work they put in is what allowed us to get here. So that's the first place I want to start. So we have a lot of similarities. We share a common culture. We share an ethnicity to an extent, a lot of similarities. When Nigerians came here to America, the first round of immigrants moved into the commercial centers where there was big colleges, basically. A lot of folks moved to Houston to go to U of H or to go to Texas Southern. Those that moved to Dallas went to Dallas Baptist or went to UTA or went to SMU. Those that went to the DMV went to the schools out there. So Nigerians gravitated to where they could go to school because the first round of folks that came here generally came from money, had parents that had money. The second round and third round, like people like my parents, like my dad, for example, my dad didn't come from money, but he had family that did. So whenever he looked to come to America, he went to where he had a family member. It's kind of like that chain migration that they talk about.
A quick follow-up on that. You just mentioned Houston a moment ago, and I think most people who know about Nigerian immigration to Texas think about Houston more so than Dallas. But I also don't want to act as though when we say Nigerian, that's all one population. So in terms of ethnic groups from Nigeria, are they all moving to different parts of Texas, the same parts of Texas? How is that dynamic playing out within Texas itself?
I would say Nigerian immigrants generally move to, and that's a good point you made. I'll come back to about the different ethnicities that make up Nigeria. But Nigerian immigrants are usually moving to Dallas and Houston. Houston will have the largest, by percentage point, group of Nigerians in the whole country. Houston is number one. The DMV area is probably number two. Dallas will be like number three. New York 4, LA like 5. And that's just because of the chain migration. People are going where they know folks. They're going where they know there's economic opportunity. They're going where they know there's good schools that can give me a better life. But then your question about the different ethnicities, for those that don't know, Nigeria, the nation of Nigeria is not a nation state. It's a state that was created by British colonial masters, meaning that there's hundreds, over 300 different ethnic groups that people call tribes. They're really ethnic groups that make up Nigeria. And those ethnic groups don't really, generally, they go wherever there's economic opportunity. So I won't say that I'm Igbo. Igbos are not just going to Houston because only Igbos are there, or they're only going to Dallas because Igbos are there. They're going wherever they know there's opportunities and there's Nigerians that they can relate to, because it's like if you look at South Asians, for example, Indian Americans can pretty much go where they know that their brothers or sisters or their cousins are at, because they know this person may assist me as I'm trying to climb that economic ladder, or they may help me get through school, or they may point me in the right direction. Nigerians and other ethnic groups that have immigrated, I believe, have followed that same path.
You know, Texas has not been, despite the long history of the progeny of enslaved Africans in Texas, it has not been necessarily a welcoming place all the time for people of color. And I think about just before you arrived here, there was the infamous murder of James Byrd in East Texas, since you mentioned it. And so, you know, I wonder about that sort of hostility, how your parents may have dealt with it, and whether or not you encountered any hostility besides people laughing at your name or maybe your dialect. But what was growing up in the area like? What was going to school like? Did you suffer those slings and arrows of other Black kids?
I want to say I had a fairly decent upbringing when it came to racism or discrimination. I didn't face it, at least as overtly as others may have, until I ran for city council. When I ran for city council, that's when I faced real racism, real in-your-face racism. And let me give you the lay of the land for Grand Prairie. So Grand Prairie had not elected an African-American to the city council since 1990. The last African-American to serve, his term expired in 94. Before him, 2 other African-Americans had served. One was appointed and one was elected. So he was the 3rd African-American to ever serve. we had not elected a black person to the council in a city that's 25% black, about 45% Hispanic, and 25 to 30% white, 7% Asian about. We had 7 white folks on the city council and 2 Hispanics at the time when I was running in 2021. I kid you not. The individual that I ran against, he was an incumbent and had served for 12 years. When he was first elected, I was 10 years old. So I was a kid. People thought I had no chance. But when they saw I had a chance, because I got into a runoff election with the incumbent, which shocked everybody. People were shocked that I made it into a runoff. They ran one of the most racist campaigns against and I tell people every time, against a young man, a young black man that I was 21 years old, turned 22 halfway through the campaign. I was in college. I was a college senior. He sent out advertisements that would have, how do I explain this? Like clothing line racks, like outside of your home, and affordable housing or low-income housing projects, and said, don't let Grand Prairie become this. Junior Ezeonu supports subsidized housing. That's one thing they ran. They took pictures of a little girl holding a teddy bear and said, Junior Ezeonu wants to defund the police. A teddy bear won't protect you against crime or something like that. And I can show you all these mailers. Like I have them in my phone. I had a lady come up to me at the polling place, at the early voting polling place. And she said, and I pardon my French for me saying this, we don't need that shit here in Grand Prairie. We're fine. She walked up to me and said, we don't need that shit here in Grand Prairie. We're fine.
Wow.
And I said, thank you for coming to vote, ma'am. Have a blessed day. I mean, that's how you got to do it. Had people on social media that were supporters of the incumbent telling me to go back to Africa, telling me to go back to Nigeria. They told me to my face, if he gets elected, this city will be infested with drugs and crime. The city's going to go to hell.
Well, what made you stay the course, and why did you run for office anyway?
Great question. And what I always tell people, because I work as a consultant now, but I still help people for free too. And I always tell them, you have to have a why. You have to have a why. My why is what made me stay the course. Kevin, I decided I wanted to run for office when I was in high school. That's what I decided. I wanted to run for office during the 2016 election. And I figured out why I wanted to run during college. And my number one reason for why I wanted to get involved into governance and making a difference in this field is healthcare. Healthcare is my number one issue. And you may ask why. 45,000 Americans die every year because they don't have health insurance, because they're not getting those preventative checkups. They're not having those physicals. They're not getting their labs ran, their blood work done. They have no idea what's going on in their bodies. And then they get stage 3 or stage 4 cancer. And by then it's too late to reverse it. You may treat it, but it's terminal. There's so many people that deal with this. So that issue became what motivated me to go and want to serve and to make a difference in my community. And as time went on, I found different issues, whether it's economic development, whether it's helping Black-owned and minority-owned business owners, or whether it's just making sure that people that live in my community, regardless if they come from money and live in a wealthier area or live in a more working-class area, get access to the same city services, decently maintained streets, clean water for everyone to drink regardless of where you live and if you live in this community. If infrastructure maintenance, transportation, these issues became things that I cared about because I looked in my community. I said, wow, I didn't know this was happening because I live in this bubble. I knew that healthcare was my major issue that made me want to run for office, period. But I gained a greater understanding of other issues that are plaguing working class, regular people on a day-to-day basis. And I said, I want to be their fighter. I want to be their champion. I want to advocate for them if they can't advocate for themselves. When I was elected, I was one of the first 2 African Americans to get elected since 94. And in the last 2 years, we've elected 2 African American women to the city council. So we now have a plurality Black council. But that's because of the work that we put in and gotten people involved and showed them what can happen when you have adequate and decent representation that cares about everybody in the community.
There is a question we always pose to our guest, and I think you are one of the clearest embodiments of why we ask this question, which is, as someone who has lived most of his life in the American South, in Texas in this case, when you hear the expression, the phrase, the New South, what does that mean to you?
The way I look at it is a more ethnically diverse South, but not just ethnically diverse when it comes to Black, white, Hispanic. We have a lot of different people. We have Asian folks that have moved here, Vietnam, from Southeast Asia. And we're ethnically diverse in what we do, the jobs that we have, the communities that we live in. At one point, people assume if you come to Cedar Hill, for example, in the Cedar Hill part of Grand Prairie and the Cedar Hill as a whole, you will see multi-million-dollar homes sitting on the high hills, and it's people of color that live in those homes. In the past, people would think that, only a certain demographic will be living in those communities. No, it's people that look like you and I that live there. But also, when I'm thinking about the New South, I think about the leadership changes. I think about people like Jasmine Crockett. I think about people like, may her soul rest in peace, Sheila Jackson Lee. I think about people of color that are serving. The Harris County judge, Nina Hidalgo, was elected when she was 29 years old and became the highest top level serving elected official in Harris County. Hispanic lady at 29 years old. That's what I envision. I envision a more multicultural, multi-ethnic society where people of color are not 100% on the equal footing with white Americans, but are getting there.
So you are a Southerner.
Yes, sir.
There we go. Yes, sir.
I am 100%. And yes, sir, comes from my upbringing.
Exactly.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. No, sir. No, ma'am.
And Shabuzi, is he a Southerner?
I don't know where he's from. I really don't know where he's from, so I couldn't tell you. But he's an Igbo guy. I know that. The way you pronounce his name is Chibweze, which means God is king.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. And to tell y'all a little bit about me, my Igbo middle name is Chukwuemeka. So say it with me. Chukwu. Emeka. You got it.
We make what?
Okay. Yeah. It means God has done so much. God has done a lot.
It's great.
That is fantastic. Again, thank you so much for joining us. And I think you can tell how excited we are about this episode because we did not bring up the Jollof Rice Wars. So we're going to let you avoid that topic of conversation for this episode. But we were so happy to have you on this afternoon because this was very informative.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This was fun. I mean, I was honored that y'all reached out. I said, we can do it today. When I got that email, so we can do it today. Hey, let's make it happen. So seriously, thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. Really do.
From the history of radioactive makeup to all the loony things Henry VIII did to ensure we never stop making movies about him, Weird History is a podcast that answers all the questions you didn't even know you had about the most unbelievable people, places, and events of the past. Based on the hugely successful YouTube channel, Weird History invites you to bone up on what it was like to use a public bathroom in ancient Rome while learning about the single worst year of all time. Don't worry, we missed it by a millennium or so. Then get the skinny on modern history, like the true story behind The Conjuring, and just what the hell Steven Seagal did to get banned from SNL. Let Weird History be your guide to the stranger side of history they don't teach you in school. Because the past is weird, a lot weirder than you think. Subscribe now, wherever you get your podcasts.
Our next guest on this episode is Steve Rao. Steve Rao, a native of Charleston, West Virginia, is currently the at-large council member for the town of Mooresville, North Carolina, and served as mayor pro tem from 2015 through 2017. When elected in 2011, Steve became the first Indian American elected official in Wake County and is currently the longest-serving Asian American official in North Carolina history. Steve has been a vocal proponent for the creation of jobs for immigrants in the tech industry in North Carolina's Research Triangle, and he presently serves a constituency that includes a large population of Asian Americans, especially from his parents' homeland of India. Our New South welcomes Steve Rao.
All right. Steve Rao, thank you very much for joining us on this edition of Our New South. We wanted to focus on something that was very interesting in our first season on this podcast, and that had to do with immigration in the South. And you may know this, though our listeners may not, but Asia is the second largest origin of birth for immigrants in the United States right now. And obviously your parents immigrated from South Asia to West Virginia, and you've spent much of your time growing up in the South. And so one of the first things we want to ask is who you are, where you're at, and what you do.
Okay, great. Well, I'm Steve Rao. I serve as a senior member of the city council or town council in Morrisville. I served as mayor pro tem for 4 years. So I'm in my fourth term, 13th year of service. On my last year of my fourth term. And I am originally from West Virginia. My parents immigrated there in 1968. I have a law background, but I went to Emory University. I was a junior tennis player, won 2 state championships in Delaware. That's why I had a really big on Joe Biden, because I grew up in Wilmington. When I was 18-year-old, I used to see him drive around in the motorcade as a U.S. senator, and actually saw both his sons, Hunter and Bo, who went to school at Archmere. And those were all rival schools, Wilmington Friends, Archmere. Then I went to Emory, where I met my college sweetheart at the age of 17. And now we've been married for 31 years. And
congratulations.
Children. One who's a journalist, actually, a graduate of UNC Husman School of Journalism. She's in Nairobi working for Reuters on a fellowship. And then our son is an engineer, biomedical engineering student at NC State as a sophomore. And now I have a kind of a new career in media. I host a show on WPTF, one of the largest shows, on Friday. I'm a frequent appearance on PBS, Carolina, State Lines, and Black Issue Forum. And then I host a radio show on the region's largest Indian radio station. So I love that part of my life. And then I do governmental affairs and consulting work. And largely my work is in technology. So spend a lot of my time with CEOs, venture investors, serve on the boards of companies, work with people like John Chambers, who's my bigger brother from West Virginia, who ran one of the largest technology companies in the world. And he's been a big influence on me, kind of navigating me through kind of like the cutting edge of tech. And he ran a $47 billion company and made 10,000 millionaires and acquired 180 companies. And he's from Charleston, West Virginia.
Oh, so what was the attraction that you know of your parents to moving to the U.S. and then for you for really making your home in the South?
Well, first of all, my parents, my dad's father-in-law, my grandfather, and I know it is Veterans Day, he was a major in World War II for the British Army and then the Indian Army after Indian independence. And then he went on to become a top executive. Really great story. Didn't even have an education. And he was a huge force on my father. And he just told my father, my dad wanted to be a surgeon. And he said, you should go to the U.S. because it's just a great country. There was a president named Kennedy in 1961 who wanted to send man to the moon, and they did. And they're just doing a lot of great stuff. And I think it's a good opportunity for you to leave India, which is really more of a socialist country. At that time, wasn't a lot of opportunities. So my dad said, fine. And he had a couple of best friends that all came to the U.S. A few ended up in Detroit. But his closest friend, who's my godfather, my dad ended up in New York and then New London, Connecticut. And his best friend, a man named Dr. Lionel Nair, called my dad in 1969. He said, they're looking for a surgeon in West Virginia, in Charleston. And he was a urologist. My dad was the first surgeon of Indian origin in the whole state of West Virginia. Union Carbide was there, which eventually became Dow Chemical. So a lot of Indian scientists and engineers came to that part to work in what they would call, unfortunately, Chemical Valley, but the Kanawha Valley where I grew up.
That's an incredible story. And again, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I'm really happy to have you on the show today because I want to learn a bit more about what the South has meant to you, in particular, what Southern culture has meant to you growing up in it and how living in the South has inspired the kind of incredible work that you're doing right now.
Well, I think from an early age growing up, my mother was a big influence in our lives. I mean, you have to look at the 1970s. She was a vegetarian. She learned quickly that, she had to learn how to cook meat and we had to eat meat. She learned football. I mean, the first hotel room they were watching the Miami Dolphins, 1969, had an American piece of pizza, a few dollars from the government of India. And she goes, I got to learn football. And so she learned football, how to cook, and we started having football parties. And so my brother and I we had a lot of fun. But one thing about growing up in the South as an Indian American was that it forced, my mother said, we had to assimilate with other communities. So every Friday or one Friday a month, there was a Jewish family, there was a Chinese family, there was a Korean family, a Vietnamese family, Filipino, and Indian. So we would go to someone's house and have dinner, and we'd have to learn about that culture. And that had a big impact on me for my entire life. And so my mother was a really influential figure in my life in terms of teaching that, what I call building bridges.
I want to kind of fast forward to where you are today, though, in terms of your work with in Mooresville, North Carolina. And as a community leader in Mooresville, what do you think are some of the biggest challenges that are facing immigrants that are migrating to the South?
Many immigrants have come here, many from South Asia and India, because of the technology, because of the research and development, because of the doctorates they have in life sciences and technology. And many of them were drawn to this area in Research Triangle because of the universities, NC State, Duke, Chapel Hill. We got Wake Forest. We got strong HBCUs like A&T here in Greensboro, NC A&T. And, so I think many immigrants came here because they had the religious temples close by. There's 3 Hindu temples right here in Mooresville. They had strong educational school systems, and they pride themselves on education. So they could raise their kids here. And they could be with really innovative companies, starting with IBM, Cisco, SAS, the largest privately held company in the world and the leader in AI, way before we were talking about AI. And of course, now you've got GlaxoSmithKline, you've got Fujifilm Diosynth, you have a lot of really innovative companies coming in. And in the last few years, under the ARP Act and Inflation Reduction Act, you've had electric vehicle manufacturers like Forge Nano, Wolfspeed, which used to be Cree, which is now making silicon carbide semiconductor chips. A lot of that production is going on in North Carolina. VinFast, which is the Vietnamese car maker. And of course, the elephant in the room, Apple, with their big announcement of 3,000 jobs about a year and a half ago. It's kind of slowed down. So that the immigrants are coming here from other parts of the world, and I can speak a lot for the Indian American as the longest serving one, because it's a great place for them to bring their great ideas, to bring their passion. And let's talk about entrepreneurship. I mean, every day I'm going around the region, I see so many companies with great ideas, particularly now in AI. We're living in an AI economy. There's a lot of talk about jobs being displaced. But as John Chambers said a few weeks ago when I brought him in on a podcast, that there's going to be today there's 43 companies valued at 100 billion. And he thinks in the next 5 years, that could be 100 companies. So what that means, there's going to be a lot of new companies coming in AI, robotics, all these new emerging areas of economy. And it's just a great time for immigrants to be here because they have the skill sets to fill the gaps in many of those jobs. Okay. On the negative side, I will say that immigration has become somewhat of a dirty word in the American vocabulary. There's fear of deportation. There's fear of families being separated from their grandparents, their parents. And when these kids have been educated in America for 30 years, it's going to be very hard for them to move back. It'd be like my kids moving back to India when all they've known is the United States. So I think we have to work together to educate even President Trump, whom I think understands it, to know that immigrants have been a vital part of our economic growth. 44% of the Fortune 500 were founded by immigrants. Not only Google and Zoom and Yahoo, which were founded by, Google by Sergey Brin, but Nordstrom's and Best Buy and American brands were founded by immigrants. And if you accelerated the path to legal immigration in North Carolina, you could add about 900 million to our GDP, as I served on the board of the New American Economy. So that message has to be given to the leaders of our country that America needs to be the place for the best and brightest, because people are now getting frustrated. And what I think they're going to eventually move out of the U.S. to Canada, to Europe, to other places to start their businesses, which I think will set America back in terms of our economic growth and our global competitiveness.
How difficult was it or is it to run for public office in the South with your background?
Well, for me, it was the first one. And really, I mean, even then, that time, Morrisville didn't have as many Indian Americans. So, my consultant the night for the election, he said, I don't know if Steve could win. I've never, he's a kind of a funny guy. And my mom was like, do you think he could win? And he goes, I don't know. I've never run a Hindu Indian candidate in the South. I mean, we're either good. And we ended up winning. We had lost the county commission in 2010, but in a very close race to a man named Tony Gurley, who's a good friend of mine. He was the chair at the time. But we won. But I think it's like, then after that, we had State Senator Jay Chaudhary, who had worked for Roy Cooper as the general counsel, and also Janet Cowell, the treasurer. Now she's the new mayor of Raleigh. And then we had Satish and now Chaudhary is the minority whip. Satish Garamella, an immigrant from Mumbai, who's now the mayor pro tem, and a new one in Kerry, Sarika Bansal, who is from India. And then we also have Yalu in the General Assembly and Maria Savania. And in Charlotte, we have Dimple Ajmera, who represents 1 million people in the Queen City as an at-large council member. So all of a sudden, it's not become easier, but it's becoming more accepted. And I'm now getting calls from across the state for more Indians and more Asians that want to run.
And this is a region of the country which I can remember and which you've read in history books, elected segregationists and upheld Jim Crow. And of course, we know just not too long ago, one of the favorite sons of North Carolina, Michael Jordan, was questioned about his political stance when he apparently did not support Harvey Gantt in running for Senate against Jesse Helms by saying Republicans buy Nikes too. But here you are, you've transcended this, and so many other South Asians have transcended this in the South. That must be an amazing feeling to have come that far in what seems to be a really short period of time of transformation for the South.
Yeah, and I was thinking about that the other day when I was running. We really come a long way in the last 4 years. I mean, think about 2011, we had 1, 2013, we had 2, 2015, we had 3. Then now we've got 4, 5, 6. So that's a pretty significant growth. And I think that eventually the number will get to 8 or 10. And you have 10. And then I think you start growing it in other areas of the state like Wilmington, Greensboro, Winston-Salem, Charlotte. And then I think you have a handful of electeds. And I think it makes a difference to have a seat at the table. I think it's important for government to be reflective of the body of the citizens that it serves. So, it's really exciting. And I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity in the future.
I'm thinking about this, Public Enemy, the rap group, who I suspect you're familiar with. They had one of their more infamous albums was titled Fear of a Black Planet. And so I wonder with this moment that we're in, that you reference, this pushback against immigrants that may be coming with this second Trump administration, whether there's any concern that in the South, where you've been so successful assimilating and winning public office, whether or not there's going to be any fear generated against a brown planet in the South.
First of all, I think there is a problem with illegal immigration, and we need to have laws in this country that make it illegal across the border. But we also have to look at the root causes of the problem of this migration and come together as a nation to solve it. I think there's this notion today that all immigrants are bad, and they're not. I've met refugees. I've met people that have coming in this country. They're working in the farms. They're supporting agriculture, which is a multi-billion-dollar industry in North Carolina. They're working in restaurants and retail. So we actually need them, and they're producing in the economy, and they're paying taxes. So I think we have to figure out how do we assimilate them in. America is a light. It's a light of hope. And the immigrants that come in here are transforming this nation by bringing so much of their great minds, right? And so if we make immigration a bad thing, if we show the world that we're so divided, that we don't want people coming in that look like us, that all look the same, we're going to send a signal that we don't want you. And I think we often forget that that's going to hurt us economically long term.
To expand on that for a second, I'd like to ask you a question that we ask many of our guests, which is, when you hear the phrase, the New South, what does that mean to you? It's a phrase that is obviously part of our podcast title. It's been said before. But to you, as someone who's a community leader, who's an immigrant, son of immigrants, who has really made a name for himself in North Carolina, what does that term New South mean to you in particular?
Well, when you're growing up as a kid reading in history, when you think South, you think segregation, you think the Elvin Pettus Bridge in Alabama, you think George Wallace, you think Dr. King and the Civil Rights Movement, Robert F. Kennedy and the sit-ins, right? The Freedom Riders, right? Those are the images you have of the traditional South. And then you think of the New South, you think of, and I've said this when you sent the questions, I can have a banh mi sandwich and a samosa in one hand. I can have a pork sandwich in the other. I can go to the Bluegrass Festival in Raleigh. I can go listen to I went to a Bhangra Punjabi music festival with my wife on Saturday, or we can go to a Bollywood concert, and we celebrate other things. I went to the Oktoberfest in Cary where there was German food. So imagine the New South is we're all working together. We're all building bridges with each other across every gender, across every race, across every religion. And this is powerful.
And it's provided you and your family and friends some comfort, because you mentioned in a recent radio interview how excited you are and how cool it is to have a South Asian breakfast, to listen to South Asian radio. And most importantly, I heard you declare on radio, we are the cricket capital of the United States, which you forgot to mention cricket, and I got to bring it up.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I got so busy on immigration. So it has been amazing what we've seen. I mean, cricket, to buy a Major League Cricket team, let me explain Major League Cricket. Major League Cricket is the professional franchise of cricket. So you have the International Cricket Council, which is the governing board, and then they have Major League Cricket. So Vijay Srinivasan is the CEO of Major League Cricket. He grew up in Cary. He's from NC State, actually Duke. And he's an entrepreneur and a venture capitalist. And so Satya Nadella, the chairman of Microsoft. And so they've invested in these teams that are pooling talent from all over the world, the top cricket players in the world, from South Africa, from India, from Australia, from New Zealand, from the Caribbean islands like Trinidad. They're coming now to the United States. And Morrisville, we have a multi-purpose park. And about 2 years ago, Major League Cricket said, we want to invest $3.5 million to build out your stadium, your bleachers. And the result, we had Major League Cricket in Morrisville. We've had Team USA train in Morrisville. We've had Sri Lanka come to Morrisville. And we're trying to get the World Cup qualifiers. So it's just really exciting how it's been a cricket transformation with these immigrants from around the world coming and not only bringing the dance and the food, but now bringing this great sport. And so it's been really, really amazing to watch it. I hope you can come and visit us next summer when we play the Major League Cricket Championships. It's quite amazing. And so, yes, I would say we are the cricket capital of the U.S. And I don't use that in speeches anymore because my wife's heard it so much. I try to come up with new content. So, 1 year I do metaphoric speaking, Star Wars, Avengers, that stuff. And so, I got to come up with, but you brought it up. So,
well, thank you very much for sharing your time with us.
I got to say, one of the things I enjoy about this podcast is learning so much about the region in which I grew up and lived in for so much of my life. And, frankly, I've been pleasantly surprised by learning about how much immigration has changed the South, and in particular, immigration from places like India and Nigeria. And today's episode really showcases that in terms of how those two countries have given so much to the New South of the 21st century.
Yeah, it's an interesting attraction because we talked in the first season of the show about how most African immigration to the United States winds up in the South. And here we have a Nigerian American who is not only so comfortable in the South, but also has run for office and gotten people to vote him into office in the South. And on the other hand, we have someone of South Asian descent. And we can think of that, I think, in terms of politics. We know a lot of the names like Nikki Haley, who hails from South Carolina. But it really is interesting because, as you said, I know for me, I was very surprised, maybe more surprised than anything we've talked about on the show, about the international immigration to the South, whether it's folks from Central America or elsewhere in Latin America, or in this case, folks from Asia and from Africa. And before, we've even talked about people coming here from Middle Asia and from the Middle East. So it's really a very rich and colorful development that's happened in the South.
And speaking of different and refreshing takes on Southern life, our next episode is all about tourism and how the tourism industry in the South in recent years has begun to really pull back the curtain on the fullness of life in the South.
Absolutely. It's a little bit less savory because we'll be talking about a part of the history of the South that can be troubling. But it's interesting that the South has come around to not being fearful of discussing in a very public way the history of progeny of enslaved Africans in the South and the way that the poor were able to commercialize the running of liquor in the South, which has now turned into a booming business that we know of as the bourbon business.
So really, in our next episode, there's a lot for people to really think about and chew on as we talk about tourism in the South. And when we pull back that curtain, I think folks will realize that while the story of the South can at times be painful and troubling to hear, it's still important for all of us to experience it through tourism and the like.
Absolutely. It is a part of American history.
You know what I'm saying? It's like we got a demo tape and nobody want to hear it, but it's like this the South got something to say.
Our New South is presented by Levine Museum of the New South. Levine Museum connects the past to the future to realize the promises of a New South. To learn more and donate to projects like this, visit museumofenewsouth.org.
Our New South is produced by Next Chapter Podcast. Thanks to editor and sound designer Kyle Murdoch, producers Brian Douglas, Alexander Piñeres, and Cliff Whitfield, senior producer and writer Byron Hunter, and executive producers Jeremiah Tittle and Frankie Abbott. Please follow the show, subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Amazon Music, or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Learn more at nextchapterpodcast.com/Our New South.
Thanks for listening.
The South got something to say.
From the history of radioactive makeup to all the loony things Henry VIII did to ensure we never stop making movies about him, Weird History is a podcast that answers all the questions you didn't even know you had about the most unbelievable people, places, and events of the past. Based on the hugely successful YouTube channel, Weird History invites you to bone up on what it was like to use a public bathroom in ancient Rome while learning about the single worst year of all time. Don't worry, we missed it by a millennium or so. Then get the skinny on modern history, like the true story behind The Conjuring and just what the hell Steven Seagal did to get banned from SNL. Let Weird History be your guide to the stranger side of history they don't teach you in school. Because the past is weird, a lot weirder than you think. Subscribe now, wherever you get your podcasts.
Next Chapter Podcasts.